All right, welcome everybody to our last member lecture series in 2025. And we will be kicking off 2026 pretty early this year. We're actually going to have on January 5th this year, we're going to have Arthur Hardy talking about his last year of covering Carnival. So I hope you will be signed up for that and enjoy our lectures in 2026. We should probably have about 20 to 25 lectures throughout the year, and we're going to be focusing on America 250 as that comes in 2026. So I hope you enjoy those. And as always, it's free to members. Just a couple quick other notes we've got going on. Next Friday, we have Paul Sanchez at the New Orleans Jazz Museum, the first of our concert series. And then we also have our annual symposium, which is on Saturday, December 13th. And it's on the role of Spanish Louisiana in the American Revolution, which, if you're not aware of it, Louisiana had an extremely important role in the American Revolution. So I won't spoil anything, but I hope you take advantage of that. We're going to be bringing speakers in from DC and St. Louis, and we'll have a couple other speakers that'll be hybrid on Zoom, but we're going to have in-person as well as Zoom options as well. So I hope you take advantage of that. But tonight we're going to be talking about a fascinating book and a fascinating story. We're going to be welcoming the two editors of the book, Bruce Magee and Stephen Payne. And we're going to be talking about, when I did a little research on this, I was really surprised about it. Louisiana and Liberty in Louisiana, a comedy by James Workman, which is considered one of the earliest plays written in Louisiana. And these two guys have done some work on it and can provide us some more context and understanding of this and the work that they did on this book. So I want to welcome Stephen and Bruce and welcome you guys, and thank you so much for being here tonight.
Howdy.
Thank you so much, Jason. And I'm Bruce Magee.
And I'm Steve Payne.
And just briefly, we are the editors of the Louisiana Anthology, an online collection of texts about Louisiana. We've just passed 10 million words this year and around 260 authors. And most of it is, except for this one book, is available free online. And that includes, well, does not include this because this is actually for sale through the ULL Press. Why don't you tell our folks a little bit about Liberty in Louisiana, Stephen?
Yeah, so about 7 or 8 years ago, I was reading an article and later a book about the history of Southern drama. And a guy named Charles Watson was the scholar / author of the book. And he had written about this thing, or really about a lot of early American plays. And he mentions this play by a guy named James Workman. I'd never heard of him. He mentions the play by name, Liberty in Louisiana, but before it's over with, in his article, and as I said later in his book, he's quoting the play verbatim. And I realized, my God, he's got a copy of the play, because he wouldn't be, quoting this thing line by line if he didn't have a copy of it. It's not as though he's, memorized, this play where he would maybe forego Shakespeare. And so I realized in the play, at least at the time that he had written the article and later the book, and this is back, the article and book are from the 70s and 80s. And I realized, at least at that time, the play had to have survived somewhere. He had to have a copy of it. And so I did some poking around. We finally found it in a database. So I went through the Lincoln Parish Library here in Ruston, and they were able to get me a copy of it in PDF form. So somebody had taken the microfilm of, or had taken a microfilm, I should say, of the original play, and then they had digitized it. So it was, sort of far removed from the original, but it was at least a copy of the play. So that was sort of the genesis of this. We were able to get it. And as Bruce said, this is, or as Jason said, this is, as far as we can tell, the oldest published play about the state of Louisiana.
And as far as we can tell, it was existing on a microfilm on a shelf somewhere until you asked for a copy of it. And they just digitized that play for us, but it had not been online in any form.
Yeah, and it's the second edition of the play. As we'll reveal here in a minute, the play was actually very popular in its time. He writes this. Now, this is what's really amazing. The Purchase becomes official, I think, the 4th of July of 1803, at least the idea that we're going to buy, that early America is going to buy this vast territory. And the announcement's been made and so forth. It's been revealed to the public. And Workman pretty quickly writes the first edition of the play. It was so popular, it goes almost immediately into a second edition. But that's only half the story, as you'll find out here in a minute when we show you the cast listings.
All right. So we have a few more resources available to you, again, for free. This is our main web page with the links to everything else. And in addition to the texts, we have a podcast, a cookbook, cooking blog, over 1,000 recipes. And these are mostly recipes taken from those old cookbooks like Eustace wrote and Hearn, and so 100-year-plus old recipes in lesson plan. So if you're a teacher and want to teach about a topic of Louisiana, check our lesson plans. We may have something there for you.
Yeah, quickly, the Anthology is the largest collection online of texts about Louisiana. So it includes traditional literature like poetry, drama, and fiction, but also non-fictive literature like biographies, histories, autobiographies, memoirs, essays, travel narratives,
blog posts. We got, that the kids like these days.
Yeah. It's a vast collection, believe me. We after the fact, we thought we should have named it the Library of Louisiana instead of the Anthology of Louisiana.
We didn't know what we were doing, which is kind of the story of my life. So, Stephen, this looks familiar. What is this we're looking at?
So this is the title page, Liberty in Louisiana, the second edition. If you blow this thing up a little bit, it says it's a comedy performed at the Charleston Theater, written by James Workman, the scripter, the playwright. This is, as I said, the second edition with additions and corrections, published at, which was, by the way, a seat of early and very important public publishing in the early South, or the early American South, early Republican South. And so
this is what we got, which is, we'll see some more of it in a minute, but very user unfriendly. And then what is this?
So this is our cover to our book, Liberty in Louisiana. So you see, we preserved the original typeface from 1804, as for not only our title, but also for the credits there at the bottom by James Workman, and then edited by Bruce and myself. And you see this really beautiful painting there, kind of in the background.
We have the actual painting in a minute that'll be easier for them to see. We'll
talk
about it.
But this, we kind of dressed the thing up, so to speak, and put it in a tuxedo or an evening dress, so it looked kind of
and cleaned up the print so you can actually read what it's saying. Some important dates: on April 30th, 1803, Louisiana Purchase is signed. They called it the Session. July 4th, 1803, it's announced on our nation's birthday. And then October 20th, it was ratified, which was no means a done deal. And on the right, you can see the actual treaty, which we have on our website in both French and English.
Keep in mind that those dates there, because this is about a generation after the Declaration of Independence. That is 1776. This is 1803. So we're now dealing with the first generation growing up in America, not in British America. So it's a very, very different audience from those people who would have been, watching a play in, say, 1776 or even 1780.
So, if you want to read these side by side in French and English, we are the place you can do that. We're the only place with this in HTML. There's a Google book with it, but it's pretty wretched. So you'll want to come here for your Louisiana Purchase Treaty. Here's that picture. Stephen, you want to talk about it a bit?
Yeah, so if we look down at the bottom of the page to give you a little bit of context, this was painted by a guy named Thulstrup in 1903 for the Expo in St. Louis, which is, of course, the 100th anniversary of the Louisiana Purchase. So if you look kind of moving from left to right on the painting, you see the French tricolor has been lowered, and then they're going to be eventually raising the American flag. and you see the period correct costumes there in the back with the French troops there in the back, and then the guys in the blue are the American soldiers. And in the back, the very back, I should say, these are the foreground, but in the background, you see the cabildo. And you see various people like the soldier in the front doffing their hats or doffing their caps in salute to the American flag, but also to the Louisiana Purchase.
And this is period correct building as well. The cabildo only has 2 stories, as you can see, and St. Louis Cathedral is, this is version 2.0 after the, after it was rebuilt, but before the current structure was put into place. And what's important about this picture, this painting for our project, is Liberty in Louisiana takes place in the Place d'Armes, what we now call the Jackson Square, and in the Cabildo, a little bit on the river, a little bit in a home, but mostly right here. So it's really exciting tonight to be talking about a play about being in the Cabildo to an audience that is here as, friends of the Cabildo. So it's actually history taking place. And in this case, he's putting his play into place in the foreground of this, vast upheaval, which, it's hard to imagine many more events more important to the development of the history of the United States than the Louisiana Purchase. Tell them about our, and here's the before and after of the people in the play. But Stephen, why don't you tell me about our, what you found out about this?
This seems to be the first, the first iteration of the play, the first cast listing. Think of this as though you would the credits, the closing credits where you see these, for a TV show or movie or a stage play, and you see, so and so actor is playing such and such a role and so forth. And you'll look and just, some interesting things, you see a lot of the characters are Spanish, but some are, are English speakers of various kinds. Some are old world English, some are American. But if you go down the page, this is the middle of that A and B column on the left screen there, where it says Don Antonio Gaspar, played by a Mr. Poe. And so I got to doing some poking around. As I said, this was more recently, probably it's 5 or 6 years ago. And I wanted to see if we could find out any information about the earliest actors in that original version of the play from probably early 1804 or, right after the session. So I do some poking around and I typed in the name of the play and actors, and I found a reference to a young woman named Eliza Arnold, who is in a later version of the play. So she's not listed here in this particular cast collection. And Eliza Arnold is pulled into the play, I think, in Virginia or Baltimore, and we'll mention some of that here in a bit. But she's pulled in the Mid-Atlantic versions of the play. She begins to act in it, and along the way, she and one Mr. Poe, David Poe, start seeing each other romantically, and they become an item, and eventually they marry, and they become Eliza Arnold Poe and David Poe, the mother and father of Edgar Allan Poe. So this is Louisiana's left-handed connection to Edgar Allan Poe.
Which, if any state is properly connected to Poe, it would seem to be Louisiana. So yes, as at the end result of our editing and our teams of students working on this, what we have on the right is what you'll get if you get the book, which is nice and legible. Okay, now here is more typical of what we had to edit. And so Stephen, you were our detective finding this, but also you then had to go through and try to figure out what word is which in here.
Yeah, I had gotten, as Bruce said, we got this original copy. So it's 3 generations removed from the original, possibly 4, because as Workman himself says on the title page, it's got additions and corrections. And the surviving edition, so to speak, seems to be this second edition. So we get this thing. If you look on the only screen right now, this left screen, you see the quality of the copy is pretty mediocre at best. In places, it's badly degraded. So you see, pieces of text where something's faded out. Like if you look at the line, enter Phelim looking around, but it's really faded. You go down the page, you see more of this. That was ever yet bought with money, etc. And we had passages.
Oh, Stephen, you muted yourself.
Okay, I think I'm back on.
There, you're back.
So anyway, so as I said, we had to do not only the detective work, but we had to do some reconstructive work to try to figure out what words fit with a particular line of dialogue. Because, as I said, some of the copy was so poor that it had dropped out, and it was because probably the original was just not a particularly sharp and crisp copy.
What three-letter word might fit in this spot? And we get a little bit of the personality of this play, and it's a really funny play. Just the opening line, Phelim O'Flynn without "Hola, hola, hola, Sawny McGregor, and be damned to you, my dear." Enter Phelim, looking around. "Where are you, Sawny? If you have lost yourself, why don't you tell me where you are?" Pulls out a flask and drinks. "Oh, I must take a drop of comfort before I search any farther." So you've got a Scottish guy and a Irish guy who are just kind of ne'er-do-wells drifting down the river. And if this sounds a little familiar, these are very much the ancestors of the Duke and the Dauphin in Huck Finn. And apparently these river rascals were pretty common folks that you would encounter going up and down the Mississippi at the time.
Yeah, if you recall the old TV series Maverick, which was later reworked as a movie with Mel Gibson and James Garner, the original Maverick, it's those kind of characters. They're called rogues or picaros, and so these two characters are those kinds of individuals.
Lovable rogues.
Yes, very very lovable.
All right, a little bit about James Workman. He's born in Cavan, Ireland in the 1770s, earns his law degree in 1789. He seems to have been Protestant, maybe Scotch-Irish or something, because he goes to a Protestant law school, which they wouldn't take Catholics. Settled in Charleston around 1801. Became associated with the Federalist paper, the Courier in Charleston, became a citizen in 1801, and eventually drowned in a boating accident outside of New Orleans in 1832. And tell our folks a little bit about federalism, which was important for his own political views. He was a political essayist, and he decided this time, instead of writing an essay, he'd write a play because more people would be able to enjoy it.
Yeah, so the Federalists, which were a party, held certain views about government, about the relationship of government to the people, and vice versa. They believed in a strong central government. They believed in the ability for the government to keep a standing army and navy, to coin money, to raise taxes, to build infrastructure, various kinds of roads, bridges, dams, etc., to engage in interstate commerce and so forth, to conduct treaties or to conclude treaties, and a whole long list of other things. Workman is kind of curious because, as you'll see in the later parts of the play and our discussion, Workman believed in the Louisiana Purchase strongly. And this means that he supports the idea, because a lot of the Federalists did not support the idea of the government going and buying a huge swath of land like the Louisiana Territory. Workman was all for it. In fact, he was a big cheerleader and an evangelist for it. And so he's very, outside the norm or cutting against the grain when it comes to Federalist ideology.
So Workman's so excited about Louisiana that he moved here. He comes to New Orleans right after the Louisiana Purchase in 1804. As far as we can tell, he presented the play up and down the eastern seaboard, but never in New Orleans. And there was some, difficult issues with the transfer taking place that spring and summer, and maybe he decided it was best not to put it on. Plus, hey, it's in English. But he rises up in the local power structure, gets appointed to be a judge of the county of Orleans, May 1805. He helps Livingston write some of the initial legal code for the territory. He also helped found a Protestant church in New Orleans, 1805. We think this is the what's the name of it? Christ Church, Stephen, the original Episcopal Church.
Church, yeah.
What's that?
Yeah, the Episcopal Church.
Yeah. And He helps organize the Mexico Association, intended to liberate Mexico, contacted by Aaron Burr in 1805. And what we found out for this project, when they said they wanted to liberate Mexico, they mean they want to get out from under the government because it was trying to eliminate slavery. So you could say they're fighting for freedom. You could also say they're fighting for slavery. Sided with Burr in freeing the men arrested for treason by James Wilkinson in 1807, and himself gets into some trouble. And we think this may more have to do with his beliefs as a lawyer and as a judge about due process. Like you've got to have the goods to be able to throw people in jail. And so it's not clear at all that he was part of the Burr conspiracy. Did you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, so to go back, because I'm not sure if this is in an upcoming title, but to go back to the performance of the play and the popularity of the play. So as he writes this thing, and this is in Charleston, as Bruce had said, he writes it there. And right after he writes it, all the business about the purchase comes through. And as far as we can tell, he's booking passage for New Orleans. I mean, this is right after it. He brings the play with him. But meanwhile, the play is being performed, and it is so popular, it's being performed. Do you have a title? The next title is it with this?
Oh, yes, here you go.
Yeah, so if you look there,
more about the book, Stephen. Go ahead.
Yeah, so the play is a comedy of manners. In other words, it's action among the upper classes. So these would be the nobility, or in Europe or in America, it'd be the elites. And we mentioned already it's the earliest published play written about Louisiana. But if you look there, it was performed in Charleston, New York, Richmond, Boston, Philadelphia, Savannah, Baltimore as well. So it is a super popular play, and unjustly forgotten today, as we've been saying for the past several years, actually, because it was so popular. So imagine these are the large cities of early America, and it's playing the circuit, there east of the Mississippi River. It just never travels, to Louisiana. Probably was never performed in Natchez either, because we could even make the statement it could be the first play written about the Louisiana Territory. But safely speaking, it is the first play written about this state.
The colony as well. Seems to be the first play written about Louisiana, however constructed, and also as well as the first one in English. You would have thought it would be French, but no. The first French play we've come across is from 10 years later.
And we don't know if it was formed in New Orleans because the English-speaking population was so small. It was,
right.
Pretty significant at that. I mean, there were some English speakers there, but not that many. So
there's probably no theater yet for the English. So the synopsis, most of the characters are stock figures representing the old world order. For example, Don Bertoldo de la Plata is the Senex Amans from old Roman plays, the old lover who's always ridiculous. We got two wandering picaros, or lovable rogues, to get mixed up in the action. In here, the judge has a vain wife, Senora de la Plata. They hate each other with all of their heart, but there's this young couple, Laura, the heiress, and Captain O'Brien, the American captain in the army, who are engaged, but the judge likes the young woman, and the wife, Senora, likes the young man. So they're trying to kind of work together to break this couple up at the same time that they're working against each other for a whole lot of reasons. And at the center of the action is the young heiress, Laura, the innocent yet intelligent, vivacious ward of Don Bertoldo. And you've figured out what she represents, Stephen.
Yeah, she's Louisiana.
Yes.
And so Captain O'Brien is America, or the early U.S. And so the form of the play as a comedy of manners, because they deal with stock characters, but the form of the play not only demands that order be restored in the end, but that these two characters be put together. Shakespeare played with the same ideas, but it demands.
Oh, yeah, very much rooted in Shakespearean drama, right?
Yeah, and this whole idea too, and if you kind of go back up the page a little bit, Bruce was talking about Don Bertoldo. He's like Fred Sanford, basically. If you remember Sanford and Son, well, he's another dirty old man. And these are these dirty old man characters that are always shady, always sleazy, but they're in their way, they're usually pretty funny, at least in the hands of an effective playwright and a very creative playwright. So these are the kind of characters that are involved in this play. And Laura is rather ahead of her time, or at least Workman's portrayal of her is ahead of its time, because she's not portrayed as an airhead. She's not portrayed as a dope or someone who's totally helpless. As Bruce said, she's intelligent, she's vivacious, she's pretty. So she's not a modern woman in our sense of today, but she's, definitely a woman of the Enlightenment. And kind of keep that in mind, because this is a play of the Enlightenment of the early.
And the Shakespeare's comedy heroines can hold their own, right? And so she's kind of in that tradition. Get this to work. Here we go. So talk a little bit about the plots against Laura, because she is at the center of the play.
Yes, she is the center of the play, but you got all these, people that are sort of out to get her for various reasons. You got Phelim, who finds out about Laura's fortune. And so, greed abounds here.
Stephen, your finger is over the camera. There you go. Thanks.
So then you've got Captain O'Brien, who's her fiance. Phelim is going to impersonate Captain O'Brien. And this is a commonplace, too, in the comedy of manners, where you'll have one character impersonating another. So you're playing with the idea of appearance versus reality right there.
And she's just barely ever met the guy, so he has a reasonable expectation he can pull off a false identity. Plus, they're both obviously Irish.
And then you got Judge De La Plata, who wants to elope with Laura. And of course, he's her ward, or I'm sorry, he's her guardian. You got Senora De La Plata, who conspires with Phelim to thwart her husband and have the captain to herself. So you've got both of the older parties of the older couple, engaging in their own plots. Then you've got Laura's, I guess you'd call her maid or her assistant, Teresa, who helps marry Phelim to the pregnant Lucy Margland, whom he had abandoned in Tennessee. So this is some of Phelim's backstory. And as we said, he's a really shady kind of a character. And then you've got the American general who overrules all of La Plata's plot.
And this may be part of why the play fell out of popularity. Is it's very racy. You've got fornication, you've got abandonment of a pregnant woman, you've got all of these it's not overtly, there are no sex scenes, but just the topics they're dealing with will become quite controversial.
Yeah, greed. You've got greed and an attempted swindle going on too, right?
Right. And so the question is, will the Americans arrive in time to turn over to thwart the Spanish plots and the plot of one of the rogues? And again, this has a serious underside to it, in that he is trying to show why America and Louisiana can get together. Why can these, because there were people that thought we're too different, speak the French and the Spanish, and, they've got a bunch of Catholics down there, and they just weren't sure about being able to integrate in Louisiana into the overall country. Still have our issues doing that, but he's very much of the opinion, yes, that the Americans have something to offer to Louisiana. So, as we mentioned before, there's a federalist theme. There's also the theme of the corruption of Spanish rule. The judge takes a mordida, a little bite, in all his cases. I'm sure you're familiar with the Baroness de Pontalba, who built the Pontalba buildings. But where did that fortune come from? Well, her dad was a notary public, and he took just a little bit off of each one of those deals till he became one of the richest guys in the area. The Spanish rule is monarchical, opposed to the Republican rule of the United States. The American rule will be honest. We've been around long enough now to know that's not always the case, but he believes that a republic is more prone to honesty than a monarchy. In the play, a lot missing from the early New Orleans, and that may have something to do with the fact that he'd never been here. So he's having to make stuff up based on stock figures, but there are no slaves, no Native Americans, very few lower class. So it's largely the upper class doing their thing. But he does have the theme of the blessings of liberty, as the Americans see it. So you're going to preserve the property. And of course, what that means practically is that the Americans will come in and preserve slavery, because that's where most of the property is. And, so yeah, one man's liberty, another person's not being free.
Tyranny. And there's an interesting thing about that, because the writer, the playwright, James Workman, as Bruce and I've discovered, was way ahead of his time. He was an abolitionist, of all things, in the dawn of the 19th century. But that doesn't come up in this play, and I suspect he was hedging his bets and not putting an idea like that in this particular. But again, he was for abolition, and if you realize, again, going back to the Revolution, the first American Abolition Society is founded in Philadelphia, I think in 1774 or 1775, and it's got a different name and a much smaller scope, and it's mostly meant to protect people who are so-called freedmen and freedwomen, like Solomon Northup, literally. Later, when Ben Franklin becomes the head of the group, it's explicitly for the abolition of enslavement. But again, this is a guy who is for it, in the early 19th century in Louisiana. So it's a rather remarkable fellow. Just not.
We actually have a letter he wrote to Jefferson suggesting that this Louisiana Purchase might be a good opportunity to free all the slaves. He wants to relocate them to the territory to form their own state. Nothing much comes of that, of course, but Jefferson does write back. So a lot of the play, because he is a lawyer, because he is making an argument about politics, but also the legal system, a lot of his play involves the Spanish law and its corruption, and the reputation of Spanish law was so bad that their own lawyers called it the Leyenda Negra, the Black Legend, because people just see Spanish law as being so backward. Spanish law comes to Louisiana in 1769 with Don Alejandro O'Reilly, another Frenchman, but he's working for the Spanish after the early colony had revolted against Ulloa and expelled him. Riley comes with 3,000 soldiers, puts down the rebellion, executes the leaders. The Frenchman Street is named after those martyr patriots who died at the hands of O'Reilly. And he issues the Code O'Reilly. What is that? All right, Stephen?
Yeah, I'm not going to try to butcher the Spanish here, but so the part of the code comes from the so-called 7-part code of 1265 of the Common Era. Then the next part of it is the new compilation of the laws of Castile from the High Renaissance from 1567. And then a last part, as you see on the screen there, is the compilation of the laws of the kingdoms of the Indies. And those are the ones that will apply specifically to the territories in North and South America.
And you can see by the dates that at least the early part is still medieval. And so they have a, this is part of the Black Legend, is that the legal system is medieval. Also, it's super complicated because it's got all these different parts. I don't know if a full set of Spanish law even existed in the New World by this time, perhaps, but it was complicated. It was hard to figure out which law applies and how do you apply it. And so a lot of it wound up with the judges kind of just doing what they wanted to do. The various parts of this, again, I'm not sure they would have been divided up the way we are, but this is kind of thematic. So their code, Código Negro, replaces the Code Noir of the French, and the biggest difference for this, and important for the history of Louisiana, and the most unpopular thing with the upper class who ran things, was this ability for slaves to enact coartation. In other words, they cut off their relationship from their master. Now you have to go out and you have to get the money for this, but if you do get the money, you have the right as a slave to demand your liberty. And if they won't give it, you can enforce it through the courts. And as we know, the Americans eventually come to the idea that no, you don't have any rights that the court has to respect, but very much did under Spanish law. And so one common way was working on Sunday for yourself. There are various things people did, including the selling of the rice fritters, the callas, bel calla, tusha, tusha. So very hot, very hot. And they would go around the French Quarter selling this, keep the money and buy their own freedom. And so Louisiana winds up with a lot of free people of color who are freed through this method. Oops. All right, so the next part of the code is just the civil code. Tell our folks a little bit about that.
Yeah, so in comparison, it has the better reputation. It's based in the old Roman civil law, but still it's medieval, right? So you're looking backward, and it's almost like this Enlightenment sort of thing, where this idea that we're being governed by the dead. Well, it's very medieval. They're being governed by the dead. It's overly complex. We would even say Byzantine, to use a bad pun. It's opaque, it's slow, it's corrupt, and it encourages stolen inheritance. So it's got all kinds of problems.
The judge winds up with stuff in his pocket. Just want to mention about opaque. Our legal system, for the most part, is supposed to be open to the public because it's conducted on behalf of the public. It's an embodiment of the will of the people, whereas the legal system for the Spanish embodies the will of the monarch and the church.
Yeah, it's a totally different way of looking at the state and the individual within the state, right? So,
right, the individual has no say-so over the legal system, so it's all basically secret, and nobody knows what's going on. Next, and we're kind of going up degrees of how bad it was, the Código Penal. The Penal Code, definitely medieval. A lot of the punishments were cruel and unusual. That's probably part of what got that line put into our Constitution, is the fact that there were still these cruel and unusual punishments, very excessive compared to the crime committed, no real balance between them. Again, corrupt, because if you had money, you could buy your way out of it. More interested in brutal spectacle than justice. No checks on the royal power as exercised through the judge. And it was discriminatory, not impartial. We did not have an equal standing before the law. Our standing was based on our level of respect in society, and also the amount of money we could bring to bear.
and all of this is, as Bruce said, it's medieval. So, and I mentioned earlier, this is in the Enlightenment. So much of this code and in fact, the mindset that Workman is going to promote in this play is very much a reaction against what's called before, but then offering something better, or so they thought at the time, something that's much better, that's much more just, much more effective, and so forth. So,
and last and very much worst, the Tribunal de Santo Oficio de la Inquisición, or the Spanish Inquisition. Bet you weren't expecting that. But in fact, the Spanish Inquisition had tried to come to Louisiana in the form of Pierre Antoine. He arrives in the colony, goes to see Governor Miro, and says, my son, I'm here to set up the Spanish Inquisition in New Orleans. Miro wrote later that his heart shuddered within him. And later that night, Pierre Antoine was in his room, and knock comes on the door. And here are these burly guards. He says, "Oh, not quite ready for you yet. Let's get started in the morning." I say, "Well, you don't understand, Father. We're here to arrest you." So they pack him onto a ship and send him away. The king is just about had it with these two. He says, "You're my governor. You're my priest. Y'all get along." The way they settled this was Pierre Antoine stayed, but he dropped this whole idea of the Spanish Inquisition and ironically became a much beloved local priest. People still talk about him today and his palm tree.
And
But
it represents a further break with the past, right? Because
yeah,
it's rejecting the old world way of doing things in its way.
yeah. But he does keep up his Inquisition reports. You notice down there in his hand is a pen and a paper, and it's probably where he's writing up his nightly Inquisition notes to send off to the church upstairs, so that if you leave Louisiana, you can get into trouble with the Inquisition. But yeah, the early colony had so much trouble getting and keeping population. People kept dying of these horrible diseases. And if you got somebody that could hang out, you didn't really care if they were Catholic or Protestant or even Jewish. The governor liked having people who were alive as folks in the colony. So, yeah. So these four parts, let's look at the play and see how they work out. As we said before, before that, tell them about the problems with the Inquisition. Why didn't people like it?
Yeah, so the Inquisition is not exactly a favorite, and you'll see why. But it, put in place secret courts, so everything is done, hush hush. It promoted and, in fact, enacted forced confessions. Practiced torture. It always placed the burden of proof on the accused. It promoted the confiscation of property. It was corrupt, and in fact, it encouraged corruption. It was cruel and fanatical, so you had a lot of true believer types that were running these courts. It punished people for their beliefs, and it promoted surprise, fear, and ruthless efficiency. And so if you just go a few of these, in turn, again, the Enlightenment is trying to, or the ideas that particularly the political philosophy of the Enlightenment is trying to react against this and put in place, that is, something like the rule of law and justice and equality and that kind of thing.
And we see from our friends at Monty Python, the Black Legend is still there, right? We still have that opinion about the Spanish legal system, and especially the British with their history of, division from the Catholic Church, the Spanish Armada, the Gunpowder Plot, Bloody Mary, just any number of trail of horrors that keeps this alive within them. So using Spanish legal drawbacks as a part of comedy is still with us today, and it didn't stop with Workman; it kept on going.
Laugh about it and cry about it, essentially.
So let's look at how this works out in the play, and we have this song Don Bertoldo is singing to himself. If I can my Platonic consort deceive, so a lot of packed into here. This is Laura, his consort. She's supposed to be his ward, not his consort, but he does admit so far it's Platonic, that is, they haven't had the sex. But he's wanting to deceive her to get her money. And so maybe I can deceive her and get her to marry me, or plump her down at once down 6 feet in the grave. Obviously, he didn't know that we bury above ground here in New Orleans, but he didn't really care if he married her or buried her, because either way, he got her money. Oh, what a joke and prospect so bright as Europa, by Jove, I'll lead Laura away. So we know he's evil, probably has a mustache and he's twirling it. But we wanted to look a bit at his legal hearings. He has numerous legal hearings right there in the Cabildo with these guys, and his goal is to make money, not to administer judgment. Stephen, you want to be Don Bertoldo?
Yeah, so he sends his I guess you'd call them soldiers away. You may retire till you are called, and then they leave. And then we have this little piece of dialogue here. This, Senor Scribano, is the last audience I shall hold in Louisiana. And we point out real quickly, the play takes place on the final day of the Franco-Spanish rule and the first day of the American transfer. So it's classic. Yeah, it's only 24-hour period. So
like many comedies, it's set over a period of a day. Do you want to read his dialogue there?
Very fast action comedy, and everything's moving very quickly. And he goes on to say, this is Don Bertoldo, who goes on to say, I hope it will not be an unprofitable one, i.e. my last day. And then he pulls out an empty money bag and shakes it. So he's grab all the gusto that he can.
Gotta fill up that money bag.
Yeah, boy.
No fear of that, senor. Many of your worship suitors, supposing that your decisions will be considered binding by the American tribunals, are urgent to obtain your degrees in their favor. And so the Americans are going to respect what's been done before under the French and the Spanish and not overturn everything. And that becomes a kind of ongoing issue in Louisiana history as well. Our old friend Jim Bowie from up around Alexandria, he and his brother kind of make a living for a while of making these fake Spanish land grants so that farmers will have a claim on their land. Stephen, you want to proceed?
So then he goes on, this is Don Bertoldo, goes on to say, it's on that account that I have determined to give judgments this day in favor of every suitor who applies to me in a proper manner.
Money. Your worship is always right. There'd be no use now in postponing a suit. No more fees or present can be expected after today.
No more indeed, Don Bertoldo says. Curse this treaty of cession, but come, let me know which cause stands first for my consideration. And you see a lot of stuff going on here with his corruption and greed, but also with this hierarchical system that this new American government is going to overturn or turn on its head, so to speak. And that, again, that's not just
equality before the law, right?
Yeah, and this is not just part of the Treaty of Secession. Again, back of that is this Republican idea, and back of that's the idea of the Enlightenment, that hierarchies are evil, that people should make it on their own merit.
Well, that's part of the Enlightenment, that everybody is equal, or should be. Don Antonio, it is supposed the courts of law, American courts of law, would consider your judgments to be final and decisive. So that's why we're coming to him today.
This opposition is just. Those tribunals will not have the insolent folly to set aside each such wise and honest decisions as we always give. It's therefore that I have just ordered the Scribano to draw up the final decree in yours as well as several other suits. So he's, the arrogance is just, unbelievable character. The presumption is unbelievable, this character. And again, this is this, elite sort of mindset that he is always correct. He is always just in his decisions.
Yeah, even though he's explicitly corrupt. I mean, he's just spent a whole page talking about how corrupt he is. And now I don't know, maybe he's being ironic, but a lot of these people seem to be able to trick themselves into thinking, oh, yes, my rulings are just. All right, go ahead.
Yes, so Don Bertoldo, we have another case that's coming in. And Bertoldo says, let him come. And the servant walks out and he says, this is the troublesome old fellow that lay in jail 3 years on suspicion of doubting the authority of the Pope to grant pardons for murder, and 10 years more for complaining of being kept so long in confinement without a trial. He comes, I suppose, to beg for his property. So look at this, just starting off, and I'll let Bruce take the rest of this, but you've got him talking about doubting the authority of the Pope to grant pardons for murder, etc. So you've got this, blending of church and state right there, which again, the early republic is going to overturn.
Well, and this is, of course, the Inquisition part of the Spanish law. So he's got to get that in there. Even though, of course, as we say, it didn't quite actually come to Louisiana in the way you might think, but it kind of was in the background as a possibility.
Well, he's also addressing the, or I should say, fighting against the idea of a speedy trial, which was supposed to be guaranteed in the Bill of Rights, right? And so he's saying he's been kept so long in confinement without a trial.
And this will be the misapplication of the criminal code. And then he's losing his property under all three of those, I guess. You know, the church, the state, they don't want to take a piece of his property. Don Rodriguez says, "No, Senor Bertoldo, they're the worst of traitors who render his authority odious by abusing it to gratify their own avarice or malice. Would to heaven that he, that is the king, knew what sort of magistrates he employs on this side of the Atlantic. But better times are coming. He may be undeceived. At all events, the American government will do us justice." So this is the thesis of the play. The American government will do us justice. And this was a common way of criticizing the government without being accused of treason, and that is to say, oh, well, the king's great, but man, these judges, they're just awful, and he must not know how bad they are.
Never criticize Caesar, but you can criticize Caesar's ministers.
Right. That's what they're there for. The Scrivano and Phelim, one of our rogues, are having a discussion about some of what can happen to him under the Spanish legal system. If you confess the truth, your sufferings will be short, and the halter of the wheel will put you out of pain in a twinkling. So people were especially negative toward these Spanish torture devices. Here you could be tied to a wagon wheel, and that guy with the stick is going to come up and break all your bones until you die. And here's the Spanish collar. Very popular among people that own slaves, right? Then, should you have the good fortune to be tried by a merciful judge who order your flesh to be only slightly pinched with a pair of tongs, not quite red hot, or your thumbs to be squeezed in a very agreeable little screw, and the soles of your feet to get a gentle toasting before a slow fire. So here we have the tongs, red hot.
And clearly, Urbano is enjoying this lurid description, right? He's enjoying a certain perversion with that character. And again, it is emphasizing the cruelty of the system, but also the enjoyment of people that, again, sort of are its enforcers.
Yeah, and the Americans won't be doing that, at least not to their upper class people. Here's the thumb screw. Teresa, now they're hunting for Captain O'Brien. The play has advanced, and the Americans are on the scene, but Don Bertoldo is still trying to make off with Laura. Where's Captain O'Brien? Go ahead, Captain.
Yeah, and of course, Captain O'Brien has to be. The play demands, the form of the play and the plot line both demand that he be good looking, right, resolute, courageous, etc. And he comes in and says,
good chin.
Yeah, I am he. What's the matter?
Oh, sir, come and protect your Laura. Don Bertoldo and his Asgulls, Harry Potter, Agazils, are now endeavoring to carry her off by force. They have been attacked by two men who came here this morning from the Natchez, and who, on hearing her cries, ran to her assistance. So they're trying to kidnap Laura so that he's got designs on her money. But the Americans have arrived just in time, and as far as we know, Stephen, this may be the first time the American cavalry shows up to save the day.
And again, it demands that, right? The plot demands that.
And it becomes a standard. I know that was part of a lot of the TV shows, the old movies, the Westerns I would watch growing up. I believe it's your turn. And Don Bertoldo is talking to the general about how surely the Americans will recognize and respect his rank and kill the people that have been trying to get into question. The general's like, no, we don't do that. And then he says this. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, Excellency can't hang the villains off at once. I hope you won't make any ceremony about fining them smartly for their impertinence or laying them in jail till they learn to respect their superiors. So again, he's promoting that very hierarchical, very pyramidal kind of view of society. And you might want to mention kind of what's back of that, the idea of the king and the subject versus the Republican nation and the citizen.
Yeah, the person has shifted their identity. And you can see it in like Rip Van Winkle. He comes into town during the election and they ask what he's about, and he says, "I'm just a simple subject of the king." Start yelling, a royalist, because they are now Republican citizens, citizens of the Republic. All such despotic proceedings as these. So this is, again, part of the thesis of the play is that what we have under the Spanish rule is despotism. Senor, are inconsistent with the nature and abhorrent to the spirit of our free constitution. So this is our system as opposed to the Spanish. Oh, what value would be the fruit of honest labor if exposed as you would have it to the grasp of privileged rapine? Oh, what the personal freedom which Providence intends for man, if by such an arbitrary mandate as you solicit, he could be laid in bonds. And so they have to protect the freedoms and respect the freedoms of the citizen. The government is here not for the upper class, but for all. Do you ask, what is this freedom for which we deem no exertion too painful, no sacrifice too great? It is that possession which makes all others valuable. It is the security against oppressions which gives animation to the industry, energy to the enterprise, vigor to the intellect, worth and dignity to the moral character of man. So here are the things that liberty supplies, and you notice that these are all good results of letting people be free. They'll go out and have a lot of industry. They'll work hard. They'll be working their brains. They'll feel worthwhile. And these are all products of being in a republic. Despotic rule, a cursed system which palsies all the powers of the body and the mind, mars the beneficence of nature, defeats the bounteous purposes of God, and dries up or poisons all the fountains of felicity, rendering men miserable and abject, even in the intervals when it forbears to oppress, by the degrading fear and terror which it continues to inspire. So you'll notice a lot of this stuff, the kind of standard diatribe against tyranny and against the monarchy will later be brought into the arguments of the abolitionists about this is what this is doing. It's not, this is what it's doing to the culture of that's based on slavery.
It's a more what the abolitionists introduce, and he's hinting at this here, is this more expansive view of republicanism, right? As opposed to a very constricted or circumscribed view. It's very expansive. It's to be extended to all people, not just a few people.
Right. The initial republic was for wealthy white men. And so it's been spreading legislative power delegated by those whom the laws are to protect, trial by those whose own interest justice. So here is the role of the citizen, both in the legislative body coming up with laws, but also the judicial power. And that's why we have juries. They represent the body politic. So here we have a finale sung by the Americans. You want to read some of that, Stephen?
We blow it up a little bit, or can I blow it up? Yeah, here we go. So this is an interesting thing that Bruce and I did a presentation on, I guess, last year at the Louisiana Studies Conference, and we talked about the music of the play. The play is a sort of a musical, but not in the modern sense. So in other words, it's not going to look like Rent or South Pacific or Oklahoma or anything of that nature. Oliver, it's not going to be like that. Where you have the music, the lyric, the lyrics and the melodies and harmonies and so forth that advance the plot. But what the music does do here is express some of the ideas of the plot, and it reflects the characters who sing the tunes. And if you look here at this chorus, let me go down here. It says, "'Tis not the lust of sway or gold that to our country yours unites. In us your faithful friends behold, the guardians of your sacred rights." And then the chorus breaks into.
And this is the promise of the USA to Louisiana.
Yeah, and it expands. And I just figured this out just in the past week or so as we were prepping this presentation for tonight. The plot line demands that everybody be on stage to sing this. Why? Because, again, the blessings of liberty extend to all. And so everybody has to sing this. It's not just a soloist who's, performing this particular number, but instead it's everybody in the chorus, or everybody in the cast, excuse me, who is
Who's
actually
American, because that's their values.
yeah.
Sorry,
And
Don Bertoldo, you don't get
reflecting on a way of looking at the world, but a new way of looking at the nation, the government, and the individual. So for while upon yon lower our banners wave, your land no tyrant ever shall enslave. Oh, never may your people bear of tyranny the galling chain, or anarchy her scourges o'er them rear, but freedom with you ever reign. And by the way, this is before there is a Star Spangled Banner. So they would sing in those days popular tunes, or they would put these lyrics to popular tunes of the day. And I don't know what this one would have been to, but maybe Hail Columbia or something like that. But again, something that would have been popular, at the dawn of the 19th century. And you go down in the middle of the page, and in fact, the chorus sings, "Hail Liberty, celestial maid, Columbia's glory and delight." Of course, this is America. "Here be thy brightest charms displayed, and all Columbia's sons unite. For while upon you in tower her banners wave, this land no tyrant ever shall enslave." So again, he's speaking this, or he's written this and put it in the mouths of this chorus to suggest the benefits, the blessings of liberty to a new generation who follows the generation of the Revolution. Because this is, a little over a quarter of a century later. So he's singing this, or they are singing it, I should say, to new people, many of whom had not lived through the Revolution of 1775 through 1783. It's a different bunch of people.
And I believe that underneath all of this is the implicit argument that what do the people of Louisiana want? Well, they want freedom, just like people everywhere. And that's why they'll make good citizens, is because, regardless of whether they speak French or English, Protestant or Catholic, underneath all that is the desire for justice and liberty that will unite them all.
And
brings us to the
there's this whole idea that a healthy community is one where everybody's interdependent, interconnected.
Yeah.
This idea that we're all in this together. And the very idea of despotism works against that, and in fact destroys it, essentially, because who you're in it for is the monarch. You're not in it for the broader nation.
Okay, do you have any final thoughts? I think I've said everything I've got.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. As I've said, several minutes ago, the play is unjustly forgotten, I think, today. When we found it, it turned out that the only people that knew about it were a few theater scholars and historians. Most people, even in literature, didn't know about it. And they almost had to be scholars of early American literature, and particularly early American theater, to have, encountered the play's name, much less a text of it.
And unless your local library had this kind of rare, like a microfilm, or even rare, or a copy of the book, you couldn't read it. It wasn't available, but now it is. All right. Well, Jason, we will turn it back over to you and see if there are any Q&A.
Yeah, if anybody has any questions, please put them in the chat. I'm happy to ask them. I did want to jump on that microfilm aspect to it. If microfilm is no longer considered a really good source for storing information now. I think it was Stephen who found the microfiche. Do you kind of think about it now and say, man, if I hadn't found this might have been lost for, no one would have ever found it, because, we're at a point where microfiche is hard to access. It's degenerating, and it's becoming harder and harder to use. What is your thoughts on something like that?
Yeah, it's subject. I mean, I studied library science for a couple of years, actually, and it's subject to some of the same problems that a piece of film would be. The old celluloid, which eventually was, another medium, and eventually, of course, now it's digital. But it's going. One of our professors, excuse me, was a guy out of Harvard, University of Michigan. He was actually my advisor, and was happy to meet another Harvard alum like yours truly. But he said in class one day, and he used to say this, and people would just die laughing. He'd say, "Nitrate can't wait." And by that, he meant that the medium was so doggone perishable that you could have it degrade. And then you've lost, as you said, you've lost the text, or you lost that piece of information.
Right.
He was a big believer. My professor, Dr. Rodriguez, was a big believer in preserving text and preserving documents in multiple forms of media. And I think that's smart. In other words, not just in microfilm or microfiche, but in digital media, in print, et cetera. Just any, so you've always got a backup plan. And I think that's, that's like the scouts, be prepared, but you're trying to, again, preserve this thing so that someone in the future can access the information, decode it, and then hopefully benefit from reading it.
Well, and
go ahead.
Our basic project is mostly HTML, website, and there's that old joke, how long does stuff on the internet last? Well, forever or 5 minutes, whichever comes first. That anything you put up there can be, lost. So print still has a really important function in preserving things. You think about, okay, if society collapses, internet's gone, microfilm's gone, you can't, there's no electricity, books still work. They'll last as long as the paper does. And so we firmly believe in the paper copies of stuff, even as we're trying to make this stuff available. The advantage of what we are doing is it's free and it's global. So anybody from around the world can read some of our stories, but there are other advantages I see to still making sure stuff exists in print as well.
Yeah, and I was thinking, have you guys made any new, or has anybody presented some new discoveries to you guys since the book has come out? Has there been access to any other information related to this?
Interestingly enough, as they say, it's funny you ask, because we spoke at the Louisiana Book Festival last year in one of the Senate chambers. And so, and if any of the audience members, or even you, if you've been, you will see where they put you in a room, and they're really kind about this. They put you in a room that's very comfortable there, and you have multiple screens, as we did. So there was a screen to Bruce's right, one big one behind the two of us, and a smaller one to my left. And so we gave our talk, and a woman had seemed really enthusiastic in our presentation. And she comes up to me afterward. Bruce was talking with somebody else. This woman comes up to me, and I'm embarrassed to say I cannot remember her name, and I'm still looking around the house for her contact stuff. But it turns out she is a retired emerita professor from LSU. And she is, I think, a political theorist now. This is where this gets wild. She was writing about James Workman.
Wow.
Yeah, and she was, I don't recall if she was doing a book or maybe an article. I can't remember. Anyhow, she's working still. She's just retired. And so she was thrilled to be at this presentation and share this information with me and eventually with Bruce. And so if I can find her, if any of you know, any retired emerita professors from LSU who are, political scientists or whatever, please let me know, because she was writing about Workman. And we have a friend at Tulane. Some of you may know Vernon Palmer. Vernon has written quite extensively about the Spanish legal code. So he's very plugged into the play and what, kind of the legal background for the play. And it kind of helped us prepare some of those titles, because he's sort of the, one of the big authorities about that Spanish legal code. Again, how it developed, but also how it informs, some of Workman's misunderstanding of Louisiana's legal code at the time. But again, Workman has to portray Spain's legal code in such a dark light so that America's, code is so enlightening, to use a terrible pun, right?
Yeah.
It's got to make the American code look much better, much more just, and so forth. So yeah, we're always looking for more information. As I said, we did that presentation here a while back on the music, and we did find out, this is it's not a modern musical. And I want to emphasize that to people. It is not, South Pacific. It's not Oklahoma. However, we can see how the seeds of those modern musicals are planted in texts like this one, not just this one, but other texts from the beginning of the 19th century, where music was not uncommon in the play. And that it was part of the entertainment, but again, it's meant to express some of the ideas that are back of the play.
Well, and especially character development. These songs tell us about the person singing them. One thing we're working on now that you guys might find interesting, we're digitizing the 1915 edition of the Picayune Creole Cookbook, which goes through many more printings. I think it's still available today, but we don't really have access to that. And it's so long. It's got 300,000 words, which is really, really long for any kind of book. We're bumping on 2,000 recipes. I know it's going to go past that. We're kind of numbering them as we go along. We've been working on that thing for 10 years. Hoping someday to be able to finish it. But I think that'd be, like people like recipes and they like cookbooks, and
Like to
it's really nice to be able to look through an old book and see, okay, how are they making stuff?
I had an aunt every time we would go. They lived out in she and my uncle lived out in West Lincoln Parish in my grandparents' old house. And she was very West Coast Sicilian, and she was hysterical. And every time we'd go out to their house, the first thing out of her mouth would be, "Let's eat."
Yeah.
That's very Louisiana, though, right? I mean, she adapted to our family very well because it seems that one of the biggest things we like to do in this state is eat. And not, we have posted, and Bruce can tell you the exact figure better than I can, but we posted something a few years ago. Was that pecan and sweet potato pie, maybe? And didn't it get something like 20,000 hits on Facebook or something ungodly?
Yeah. Back when Facebook would let you just get hits and you didn't have to pay for them. It was pumpkin pecan pie. You put pecans on the top, a little bit of like both, but it's not as overwhelming as either. So yeah, I like it.
It was, and he posted something else too, and I think it was respectable. I think it got 8,000 or 9,000 hits before they, put a clamp on it or whatever. So we find some of the things that really get large numbers of hits are things like recipes, but also very local things that people appreciate, like something we just posted about Gentilly Plantation or something. Well, that took us a lot of hits. We're now being carried on something like 40 or a little over 40 different podcast platforms on our podcast. Who knew that people would care that much about literature of Louisiana, because we knew they cared about the food and the architecture and the music, but apparently they care about the literature too.
And we do have the podcast coming out every week. It's an hour about Louisiana, and we get a really interesting guests on to talk about stuff. So if you're interested in hearing more.
Yeah, we even did a podcast about 3 weeks ago, I guess, with a young scholar named Leah Payne, who, as far as I know, we're no relation. But anyway, we brought her on to comment about the death of Jimmy Swaggart. Former Louisiana megachurch preacher and a televangelist. And my parents knew him when I grew up in Baton Rouge. My parents actually knew him because my mom's bank, were the holders of his bank accounts. And his fleet was serviced by where my dad worked in Baton Rouge at the car dealership. So I met him when I was a 6th or 7th grader. And it turns out, and I'm saying this to some of my cousins, and one of my cousins said, well, something about their grandmother didn't like the antics of Jimmy and Jerry Lee. And she said something else. And I said to her, wait, are you telling me y'all are kin to Jimmy and Jerry Lee, Jerry Lee Lewis and Jimmy Swaggart? She said, yes. And I said, my God, we've known each other since we were babies. These are my cousins, 2 of my close cousins. And you're related to Jimmy? And she said, yes. And I almost flipped my lid, so he'd be my in-law, but lo and behold, he was actually a cousin to my cousins.
No.
And just a few weeks ago, we talked to your own Ed Branley about the Lafayette anniversary. He visited the country on the 50th birthday of the United States. One of the most popular places he came was New Orleans, right? People just loved him. And y'all have is that still going? Do y'all still have the
the exhibit's still there, and it's actually been extended. We're doing a Galvez exhibit for America 250, and we'll have the Lafayette on the 2nd floor. So lots to still see down at the Cabildo, new stuff to see at the Cabildo, always rotating. And a Michaelopoulos exhibit that just opens up in about 10 days.
Stephen introduced me to Galvez because of his importance in Baton Rouge. I'd never.
Yeah, he was discuss him when I was a kid growing up in Baton Rouge. I mean, my family's from up here in the hill country, but I grew up in Baton Rouge. And so they would take the kids on a big several field trips throughout the year when they taught Louisiana history, when I was a 8th grader, I guess. And so they took us downtown and we saw the site of the Battle of Baton Rouge. And that was a big source of pride because Baton Rouge was involved in the Revolutionary War.
Yeah.
Of course, he was one of our best Spanish governors too. He's a really effective governor. And so that was a big deal for us kids to say, hey, this battle was fought right here in our town, you see. So yeah, it was
a lot of stuff that we put up is available in a library somewhere, but it's never been made available digitally. So, you know, you can find all of Mark Twain's stuff, but something like a Galvez or Miro's letter about the New Orleans fire. It's easy to find and easy to read on our website, as opposed to trying to go to the library, or even digging around through Google Books and saying, okay, where might this thing be? So we want to be and Ed told us we're the first place he looks when he starts his research now. So that was gratifying.
Oh, yeah. Well, we will include also a link to the book, but also to the link to the website so people can check that out.
Great.
I really, really enjoyed the lecture tonight. Stephen, Bruce, thank you so much for speaking tonight. We really appreciate
Thank
it. And
you.
congratulations on the book and finding it and really researching Louisiana history and providing it for people free.
Thank you so much, Jason. This has been great. And thank you guys for coming on and listening to us. And you know, a cold day in New Orleans and it's dark and it's easy to just come home and go to bed. But thanks for being here.
North Louisiana, it's been down below freezing for the past couple of nights, and will be again tonight around 30 or so. So,
oh, wow.
But yeah, it's been a blast, and you know, do pick up a copy of the play. We our big goal, we may as well say two things here before we cut out, but we want to get this thing staged because, as we said, it's never been performed in our state, and so this would be not just a homecoming, but as Bruce has said, be a debut or premiere. James Workman, it's time that he come home, and so we'd like to get it performed here. I'm in some talks with some people right here in Ruston. What we want to do is a double premiere eventually. We want to get it performed here in Ruston because it would be where it starts since we're here, but we also want to get it performed in New Orleans. And so this would be like the opera that our friend Giovanna Joseph just discovered, and they recovered and then cleaned up and performed Morgiane by Edmond Dede. And so this was the first opera written by an African American who happens to be a Louisianan. And that was just performed in New Orleans and in Washington. And so we want to get this thing performed, you know, here in our state, since it was performed here.
We really want to get it performed at the Cabildo, just because it would be cool for a play about the Cabildo to be performed at the Cabildo. Yeah. We'll have to see if that's possible.
Well, and also we do accept donations. We are incorporated three not-for-profit corporations. So we have a donate button on our webpage. We are going to be particularly needing donations if we get the play staged. As I said, I've been talking with the Ruston Lincoln Convention and Visitors Bureau and some various other entities too. But again, what we want to do is get it staged and have, you know, possibly some student actors, you know, maybe starting out here, say at Tech and Grambling, maybe Ruston Community Theater where they've got some high school kids.
It's nice for a college because you've got all of these different roles, including for people that at least want to walk on. Like a bunch of soldiers, you can have as many soldiers as you want. So, yeah, it calls for a big crew, I think.
Well, like I said, congratulations on the work you guys have done, and obviously you're not done yet. So we look forward to what you guys will be doing next. And thank you so much. Everyone mentions in the chat how much they really enjoyed this talk, and really just was an absolutely amazing find that you guys made. So I want to thank you so much for being here tonight, and I want to thank all of our members and guests on here tonight. And everybody have a great evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. Thanks, Stephen.
Take care.
Bye-bye.